right? Success is 20% strategy and 80% psychology. But what do most people prioritize? Most people spend 80% of their time, energy, effort, money on strategies and 20% on optimizing their inner psychology, right? So most people have it backwards because it's a lot more sexy to invest in the business or in systems that will make the business more money, as opposed to dealing with my interpersonal psychology, because what's at the root of my interpersonal issues? It's pain. The ego would always rather be right about what doesn't serve us than wrong about what does. So we all have an upper limit in terms of the amount of success and abundance and love that we feel worthy of receiving and experiencing. In order to increase our upper limit and invite in a greater degree of love, abundance, success, opportunity, we have to do what? We have to increase our upper limit. Well, what establishes your upper limit? It's your emotional intelligence, your current level of personal development, self-growth, and interpersonal work. What you think about all day, every day, is rooted in a belief. And beneath that, every belief is formed by what? By an experience. So in order to transform our thinking, our thoughts, in order to access, for lack of a better phrase, more empowered thinking, we have to go back and address the experiences that ultimately went into creating our beliefs and our identity.
All right. We are back on the Brainwashed to be broke, and with me is my friend Jake Kauffman. Did I say it right?
You did.
Hopefully I do. And he works with high-level leaders on performance, healing, and actually feeling alive in the life they built. So I'm super pumped to have you here, Jake. And yeah, just welcome.
Adam, thanks again for having me. It's good to be here.
Awesome. All right. So thank you so much. Thank you for your time. Thank you for being here. It's really my pleasure to have you here. And so I would love to start and literally like let you share a little bit of your
Sure.
background. How did you get into entrepreneurship and everything, like how it actually started for you?
Sure. So my story is a little unique. So I graduated college,
Okay.
similarly to what we spoke about before beginning to record this episode. I was raised to believe that in order to be successful, you need to go to college, right? So I went to university.
Yep.
I graduated in 2008, but that's when the global housing market collapsed. So
Tough time. That.
so
Oh gosh.
I'll never forget being in my economics class and my senior professor saying to you graduating seniors, I'm really sorry because what is happening will affect you for the rest of your lives. And he was right. We now know that,
Mm-hmm.
you know, graduates from the year 2008 will have suffered quote unquote irreparable wage damages.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
I experienced this because I, for the life of me, could not find a job for years. So I ended up going back to college for an additional year in 2009 to get a second degree, thinking that would improve my chances of getting a job. It didn't do that because, as you probably experienced, or as other people probably experienced, it took 4 or 5 years for the economy to turn around and to recover. So during that time, I worked a variety of odd jobs, mostly in the service industry because that was really all I could find. And I decided, you know what?
What exactly you've been doing, like when it comes
Oh,
to
working in
service?
restaurants mostly. Yeah.
Oh, really? Very interesting. All right.
Well, you have to think that this is before social media marketing was even a
Oh
thing.
yeah, totally. Yeah.
This is 15 years ago, right? Over 15 years
Right.
ago. So I started working various jobs. Instagram wasn't even around. I think Instagram, when did Instagram start? 2010, 2011, something like there.
Right.
So
Yeah.
marketing on social media was largely unheard of. Facebook didn't come around until I was a junior in college. And that's
Hmm.
back when you had to have a .edu email address in order to get an account, right? You had to have a university email address. So I worked a variety of odd jobs over the years, but then I kind of caught the entrepreneurial bug and helped one of my good friends start a business that's still in existence today. We started a brewery in Southwest Michigan, which is,
Mm. Oh, okay, so
yep.
how did that came to like, oh my gosh, like that's really interesting actually.
So, I mean, it just goes to show you that a lot of success is right time, right place. So we
Right.
started brewing in his garage, right? Because
Hmm.
both of us really loved cooking. And personally, if you're good at cooking, you're going to be good at brewing
Hmm.
because, in many respects,
Hmm.
brewing is an extension of cooking, right? Because you're allowing
Right.
your palate to dictate the taste of the beer and how much
Hmm.
wheat you have in the beer compared to hops. How does the yeast
Hmm.
and the yeast strain affect the flavor of the beer, etc. So we opened a brewery 2011. If you're familiar, in the United States, craft beer really exploded around that time. And there was not another brewery within 35 miles, so probably 50 kilometers of where we opened our brewery. And we just exploded. We could not keep up with demand. We would often run out of beer, so we would have to close, on a Saturday,
Hmm.
and we couldn't be
Uh-huh.
open for several days because we had to, make more beer and we had to wait for the beer to ferment. You can't really speed those things up.
Yeah,
So,
actually.
well, it was and it wasn't because, of course, people were upset, right?
Of
And
course, right.
so
But like,
that was my first exposure to entrepreneurship, you know, rapid growth, and
right.
trying to meet demand. Obviously, it's in my opinion a better problem to have than not enough business, but it's a problem nevertheless. Um, anyway, so I worked in that industry for a number of years and ended up moving out to California. So separated myself from the business and I got into the healthcare technology space. And I realized total departure from like the craft beer industry. I won't go into all of what prompted that transition because it's just too long of a story. But nevertheless, I was one of the co-founders of a healthcare technology startup. It was a SaaS-based business, software as a service, and similar thing happened. So this is before AI, and so
Hmm.
what we did was we would install a software in the front offices of healthcare practices that would enable the front office to have bi-directional text conversations with their patients. Right? So everyone's pretty much familiar with these automated reminder systems. Press 1 to confirm, press 2 to cancel. But if you had a question about your upcoming appointment, if you needed to reschedule it, you would have to call the practice, right? You couldn't just text
Hmm.
that phone number back. It was a one-way message. And so in our minds, we were like, why can't you have asynchronous bi-directional conversations with your doctor's office when we're already doing that with everyone else in our lives? And at that point, texting had become by far and away the vast majority of people's preferred method of communication. And so we're like, let's take advantage of this. So we created a platform that blended automated messages. So we would still do the manual, or we would still do those automated reminders, but it was blended with manual response. So the patient could text
Hmm.
back if they had a question, they could text back if they needed to reschedule, anything like that. And because this was 2015 at that point in time, so almost 11 years ago now. So again, well before AI, things like ManyChat, you know, and we exploded. right? All of a sudden, healthcare practices desperately wanted our technology because they could reduce call waiting times, right? They could decrease their no-show rate, right? Every time a patient didn't show up for their appointment, the practice lost money. So we could decrease their no-show rate by improving communication and opening up a channel of communication that didn't exist at the practice prior to that. So was at that company for several years. I'm still an equity owner in the company, but it was around that time that I started my own personal development journey and started to really crave a lot more depth and substance in my work. I was just doing sales, and although I was very passionate about what we did and the problem that we solved, I was craving deeper substance, like I mentioned. And I came to realize very quickly throughout my time in entrepreneurship, as you've probably discovered yourself,
Mhm.
that people don't have business problems. They simply have personal problems that show up in the business. So I became keenly aware of this, and I had years prior. And the more I worked on myself, the more I invested in my own self growth journey, the better I performed, not just at my job, but the better every other area of my life started to get. My relationships improved, my health improved, right? My mental health improved. Um, I was no longer struggling with a lot of the mental blocks and barriers that I had previously, which we can get into what went into creating those things in the first place. But suffice it to say, we all have them. It's just a question of what does that look like and how does that manifest in your life and how does it hold you
100%.
back
Yep.
in your life and in your business. And so I started to
There is a reason. Yeah, there is a reason why they say 90% is a mindset.
exactly.
Actually.
So I started to key in on this. And because of that, I started to see it everywhere, not just within myself, but also within my co founders, our executive team, our investors. And I was like,
Mhm.
this is like this issue that we're having, despite the fact that we experienced rapid growth and became a highly successful company very quickly. We went from 6 co-founders to over 30 employees in 18 months. Just to for context.
Have you always built wired that way, like literally having multiple partners and building a business with people like around yourself, like with business, like partners and like using different skill sets basically and putting them together and like literally building the company this way? Because like most of the people,
Yep.
if like I don't know if you agree on this, but I literally what I can
Yep.
see, most people build a
Yep.
business, not even business, they build a uh, basically another job
Sure.
for them,
Yep.
right? Because is they don't understand this business mindset. They more like they are still like they are trying to run a business, but they are still in that
Yep.
employee mindset, right? They still keep struggling there. Like you going to, instead of growing like to like widely, like to the to, I don't know how, what is the vertically, and you
Yep.
know what I mean. um they're growing basically the, I'm the boss, I'm gonna manage all of those people around under me, instead of having people like outside of the business, and they just like, I'm going to partner with many people, and then I don't have to
Mhm.
care and have so many fulfillment basically, because those people have
Yep.
their own team and this type of things, right? So what is your thoughts on that actually?
I think a lot of it comes down to, well, I wish I had this insight 10 plus years ago, which
Mm,
was first determining the type of lifestyle that I wanted
mm,
and then
I agree.
build my business around that.
Yep.
Don't get me wrong, I love working with other people and being a part of a thriving culture and the camaraderie that comes with having a shared vision for the future. We wanted,
Mm-hmm.
and we did, completely transform communication inside of the healthcare industry. That company now has over 400 employees. and we have offices in the US and in Europe. And so I was number 6 at the company. So again, just for context purposes, um, the vision that I signed up for, it it manifested, right? It became a reality, which was awesome. But of course, what I wanted began to change the more time I spent inside of the business, and the more the business grew. And a lot of that had to do with the simple fact that I was a slave to the business. You know, I had to live in a certain place, right, where we were headquartered. I had to come into an office every single day, because I was managing people. And then eventually,
Yep.
I reported to not just my boss, but I also reported to a board of directors because I was head of the sales division. I was head of the sales department, and I didn't like that. I wanted more freedom. I wanted location independence, and it was right around this time, right, 2015, 2016, I started to see, right, what I would now deem as like the first influencers on social media.
Mhm.
And of course, they're showing this laptop lifestyle, being able to work from anywhere. Tim Ferriss's The 4 Hour Work Week, came out, exploded. And so I'm like, man, that sign me up for that, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and we learn by contrast. At first, I was very excited to be working for a company that had incredible potential. Our CEO was from Google. Our CTO, or yeah, our
Mhm.
CTO, excuse me, was the executive at one of the largest healthcare practices in the
Mhm.
entire U.S. And so I was very inspired to work with these people because they were incredibly smart, brilliant. They were visionaries, and that was very inspiring to me. Over time,
Mhm.
the more the business grew and the more the business became dependent on me, the less I became fulfilled. And so I was like, I want more out of not just the work that I'm doing, in terms of how it feeds and fulfills my soul, but I also want different for my lifestyle. And so the more I got clear on that, the more it became readily apparent that becoming for lack of a better phrase, a digital entrepreneur was was for me. And so I transitioned out of the company in 2018 and went full time into my business that same year. So 2018. So I'm going, 8 years now, roughly. Um, but I went into the coaching space because of becoming very keenly aware that what people really need help with is, and you mentioned it yourself, what they really need help with is their mindset. And I would even suggest deeper than that because, right, mindset is just the surface level issue, right? We need
Mhm.
to get to the root of the issue if your mindset is ultimately going to transform.
Mhm. All right. Can you expand on that actually? Because most people will probably be like, what are you talking about? Like, what is deeper level than mindset actually? Like, and there are even
Sure.
levels.
Well, the best way to think about it is beliefs, thoughts, attitude, energy, actions, decisions. That
Mhm.
is how we go about, whether you're aware of it or not, that's how we all go about creating the results that we experience in our life, in our business, in our relationships. Right? So what you think about all day, every day, is rooted
Mhm.
in a belief. And beneath that, every belief is formed by what? By an experience.
Mhm.
Right? So, in order to transform our thinking, our thoughts, in order to access, for lack of a better phrase, more empowered thinking, we have to go back and address the experiences that ultimately went into creating our beliefs and our identity. So, for example, when I was growing up, I was sexually abused. That
Mm-hmm.
created a lot of limiting beliefs, right? As it pertains to my self esteem, my confidence, my ability, largely because it happened when I was really young. And so I didn't have the tools to be able to adequately process it, right? And so unconsciously, I just continued to carry around these limiting beliefs and perceptions about myself with me into the future. So, into college, into work, into my romantic relationships. Again, unconsciously and unknowingly. It wasn't until I started to go down the path of self growth that I realized, oh, much of what I'm struggling with is actually rooted in these early childhood experiences where I made up a story about myself, other people, the world at large, that then became a belief. And a belief by virtue is that which is true, right? It was just my truth. And that informed how I thought all day, every day,
Mm-hmm.
how I interacted with people all day, every day, how I showed up inside of my business all day, every day. And that got me my results. So, again, the more I worked on addressing those deeper internal issues attached to these previous experiences that I had encountered growing up, the better I started to perform inside of my business, the more I started to feel fulfilled in my life, the more at peace
Mm-hmm.
I the more at peace I was. And you talk to anyone who's been in business for long enough, and they'll tell you really quickly that at the end of the day, we're all just chasing what? A feeling. Nobody wants
Mm-hmm.
more money. Nobody wants a more successful business. They want what that will enable them to do and therefore feel. Right. And so my mission at that point, as I started to awaken to this and was like, my goodness, why aren't more business owners focusing on this? They're prioritizing growth inside of the business way more than they are their mental health and their personal development, when in reality, those are the very things that determine growth in the business. And so most of the industry, by and large, has it backwards, right? If the core of the business is you as the business owner, as the entrepreneur, what is the core of you? The core of you is your inner work. So the more you invest in your inner work, in your personal development, the better you're going to perform in all areas of your life. And so that's why I do what I do.
Yeah, yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that because this is really powerful. You know, like, but all of people has a limiting beliefs. They have all their experiences. I had my experiences also in the childhood, bullied all the time, you know, and such. Like, because I was just different. Like, I've been, and there is nothing
No.
wrong about it. Like, you know, when I realized that, it was like completely game changer,
Mm-hmm.
right? For me, like, I've been always like too shy. I like even sometimes like when I talking to, you may feel a little bit like of the
Yeah.
nervousness or something like I don't know if
Yep.
that's the correct word to say, but basically when we started first like talking together, like I've been a little bit nervous. I'm usually like that, and then like just a few minutes talking to the person and then just like going, and I don't really care that much, you know. Anyway, this is my show, and I'm like super glad that you are here and we are having this conversation. So I'm like, you know, so yeah, it's awesome to let you share also your greatness and, you know, helping
Yeah.
others and doing this for, you know, we are not doing it for ourselves, we are doing it for other people, for, you know, that this is actually possible
Yeah.
to do, and we can show them that, you know, that it's nothing, that it's impossible,
Yeah.
pretty much. That's what I
Yeah.
believe in. um
Which
you know.
By the
So
way, and just to speak into what you shared around, that initial nervousness or anxiousness that you experience at the very beginning of a conversation, or meeting someone new like myself today, all that is, it's performance anxiety, because on some inherent level your nervous system does not feel safe when it comes to connection.
mhm,
So there's an imprint on your nervous system based on what happened to you, likely the bullying that you mentioned early on in childhood, right? That created
mhm,
a bias, right? Not even really a bias that's rooted in a belief, but it's rooted in, right, a feeling, in this sense, a nervous system
mhm,
internal wiring that then causes you to feel a certain way upon meeting someone new. Right?
mm.
Right.
Very
So
interesting.
all
Literally,
of this stuff, it affirms two things. One, that everything goes back to childhood. Two,
hmm
that you are not who you think you are. Right? You are, and I'm not saying you in this moment, you specifically, I'm more talking to the audience and in general at this point. You are a collection of adaptive traits, compensating
hmm
strategies, and unconscious biases that you so closely self identify with that determine how you think, how you act, and therefore
hmm
what you experience and how you live. So the moment we uncover those things, right, because your ego is actively working to hide them from you, that's how it keeps you in your comfort zone. That's how it maintains the status quo, which is its number one goal, right? And it keeps you from growing, at least to the extent that you are capable of. So when we transform those things, right, first step is becoming aware of them. Then once we work to transform them, that's when you can really start to unlock more of your potential and experience rapid growth.
hmm Very powerful. Thank you for that. For sure. Like this is amazing. This is so much value. Totally. Holy smokes. Well, the what I want to go and a little bit
Yeah.
discuss also is like when it comes to when it comes to these self-sabotaging beliefs and
Yep.
this type of things, like how you actually, because you said the first step is to like you need to actually like kind of name them, like you have to figure out what is that actually, or um I don't know how to express this properly this way, but basically, like we have to first find what those beliefs or something like
Mm-hmm.
that are. How, like, I don't know if like is it always easy to find out for you, like when you're working with other people, or is it like really
Mm-hmm.
like um that sometimes people, for example, like if I as a person should find them, like should try to figure it out basically by myself, it's really like it's super hard for me to actually do that, and I think lots of other people have the same
Yep.
issue. um is it like, how would you actually find the problem that is uh causing it,
Mm-hmm.
uh, to be able to like at least be
Yep.
aware of it and start like working on it.
Totally. Well, it's it's easy to create awareness.
Mm-hmm.
It's much harder to change.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Awareness comes easy. Let's take physical fitness as an example. You can watch a few fitness videos and learn very quickly, okay, that's what I need to do in order to get in shape, in order to become physically fit. Right? But that's not really the issue. What is the issue? The issue is, right, consistently going to the gym, for example. It's being more self-disciplined when it comes to your diet and your nutrition. Well, what influences those behaviors? Beliefs and the current status of your unconscious identity. So the quickest way to become more effective, more high performing as it pertains to your behavior is to shift your beliefs and your unconscious identity.
Mm-hmm.
Now, how do you go about doing that? You can absolutely achieve a certain degree of conscious awareness through things like journaling or reading books, for example. But, and to use an example, most people confuse coming into new levels of awareness with a breakthrough.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not actually a breakthrough because nothing has actually changed in terms of your external results. The only thing that has shifted is your perspective. But you have yet to integrate that into your life, into your behavior, your actions, and your decisions. So nothing has actually shifted externally. But the ego is going to convince you that, oh, I see the world differently. I see myself differently. Or I've pieced these things together as far as what goes into making up the whole of who I am. I've had a breakthrough, right? That's what's called an epiphany, right? But nothing has actually shifted externally. So coming into higher levels of conscious awareness is fairly easy, and you can do that through journaling and reading books.
Mm-hmm.
However, right, at a certain point in time, I would suggest that you need to work with someone who is capable of pointing out your blind spots because you can't see the label, you can't read the label from inside the bottle if you're familiar with that quote, or you can't see the picture from inside of the frame. So you need to work with someone who is capable of identifying and pointing out your blind spots and your biases because those are the things that your ego is looking to hide from you. Right? So it's
Mm-hmm.
the ultimate irony that as you grow and evolve, what grows and evolves right alongside of you? Your ego does. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's the plight of the entrepreneur. If you are an entrepreneur, if you're committed to a life of growth, you're going to constantly be plateauing. Well, what do you do in order to go beyond that plateau and continue to grow? At a certain point in time, you're going to need some type of mentorship, right?
Mm-hmm.
For a lot of people, that looks like hiring a business mentor, and there's a ton of value in that. I've hired many business mentors over the years to support me in, moving beyond a plateau in my business or or integrating a new system or strategy inside of the business in order to achieve growth. And what I can tell you, not just from my own personal experience, but also from the hundreds of entrepreneurs that I've worked with over the years, is that by far and away, the greatest catalyst for change inside of your business is personal development. Right? Success is
Mm-hmm.
20% strategy and 80% psychology. But what do most people prioritize? Most people spend 80% of their time, energy, effort, money on strategies and 20% on optimizing their inner psychology, right? So most people have it backwards because it's a lot more sexy to invest in the business or in systems that will make the business more money as opposed to dealing with my interpersonal psychology because what's at the root of my interpersonal issues? It's pain.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so, of course, your ego is going to say, hey, don't go there because that's uncomfortable, right? There's
Mm-hmm.
pain there, right? You're going to have to work through it. So instead, let's prioritize, right, business growth, right?
Mm-hmm.
But every strategy is built on what? The belief system of the business owner. So what we often see happen, because I'm certainly not saying that you won't experience growth if you prioritize business development over personal development, right? You can absolutely experience growth if you do that. The problem is, does that growth have staying power?
Mm-hmm.
Will it be?
What does it what does it mean? Like what would you say? Like, can you explain it a little bit better? Like what, like staying power? Do you mean like that it's last forever?
Will it be sustainable? Because if you begin to experience growth and results that supersede your, right, your identity and your beliefs, what are you going to do in order to return to what is comfortable and familiar? You're going to self-sabotage. We see
Right.
this all the time where entrepreneurs experience significant growth,
Mm-hmm.
but then a year or two later, they are either right back to where they were before, or they're in an even worse position. Why is that? Because they didn't establish a firm foundation to build on top of. What is the foundation? Again, going back to the core of you. The core of you is your inner work, your beliefs and your identity. Right? You have to shift or improve your beliefs and your identity right alongside of the business development efforts that you are making to grow the business if you hope it to last and if you wish for it to be sustainable.
Let's say because I think there is like there's a bunch of people who are probably struggling with something like this. Something that's
Yep.
preventing them to take an
Yep.
action, even though they know that the
Yep.
thing that they're
Yep.
supposed to do is actually the thing that brings them the results.
Yep.
What is it? Why is it happening? And how would you like try to push through,
Yep.
or not even push through, but you probably have to actually find the problem
Yep.
inside of you to be able to do it basically
Yeah.
effortlessly, right?
It's really simple. The ego would always rather be right about what doesn't serve us than wrong about what does. I'll say that again because there's so much juice there. The ego would always rather be right about what doesn't serve us
Mm-hmm.
than wrong about what does. Right? So we all have an upper limit, right? In terms of the amount of success and abundance and love that we feel worthy of receiving and experiencing. In order to increase our upper limit and invite in a greater degree of love, abundance, success, opportunity, we have to do what? We have to
Mm-hmm.
increase our upper limit. Well, what establishes your upper limit? It's your emotional intelligence, your current level of personal development, self growth, and interpersonal work.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you want to increase your upper limit to invite in and hold, right, maintain a greater degree of success, money, opportunity without sabotaging it, right, you have to work on improving in those areas of emotional intelligence, personal development, self growth, etc. Right? The moment you do that, greater success inside of the business is inevitable because at that point, you will not experience interpersonal resistance around taking the risks or making the decisions that you need to in order for the business to grow, right? Because we see that all the time. I know what I need to do, I'm just not doing it. Why? Right? Because the current level of interpersonal resistance that you are experiencing around that decision, that risk, that investment, right, is too great for your nervous system to get on board with. Okay, so what do we have to do?
Mm-hmm.
Again, we have to go back to and invest in increasing your level of emotional intelligence, personal development, self growth, internal work. Once we do that, we increase your upper limit, and then you will much more easily and effortlessly move through these plateaus inside of your business, and you'll naturally become more successful, right? Because we've worked on the things that are currently blocking you from receiving and experiencing those things. It's just that the
So
ego
it's
doesn't want to do that.
yeah. What I understand, yes. So what I understand is like pretty much you are basically having like infinite game of like outgrowing
Yep,
yourself, and then you are able to actually grow with actually like outside of you,
correct. Yes.
right? And all the time it's the battle of literally climbing ladder
Yeah,
on
because you
this.
cannot outperform your belief system and your current identity. Right? You
Right.
can
Yep.
for a period of time, right? And allow me to use an example for this to make sense. If I am an online entrepreneur and I'm currently not running
Mm-hmm.
paid advertising, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I get on board with investing in that, right? So I hire an ads manager, I begin to pay for ad spend, and I do all of the things that I need to do in order for the ads to start working. Well, let's just say they start working and they start working really well. And so all of a sudden, my business goes from round numbers $50,000 a month to $250,000 a month. Well, all of that money, all of that success is going to affect my nervous system and register inside of my nervous system in a certain way. And when it comes to the ego, it thinks in very black and white terms. Is this safe? Is this unsafe? Right. So if all of a sudden I go from 50K a month to 250K a month, that's a big jump. Right? That's a big jump. And now all of a sudden it's like, oh, good. Like, what do I do with all this money? What do I do with all of these customers, for example? Oh, well, now I have to hire employees. Well, now I'm having to manage them and their personalities, and et cetera, et cetera. You see what I'm saying? It's not just money.
Yep.
And so all of a sudden, I start to feel a certain way about all of these things that come with a greater degree of success. And that's when I'm most likely to do what? To sabotage, because on some inherent level, my nervous system doesn't feel safe with the amount of money, the increased responsibility, the number of customers and clients, maybe the new hires. And all of a sudden, I start to feel dysregulated. I start to feel overwhelmed. I start to feel stressed. And so, in an effort to not be overwhelmed and stressed, what do I do? Right? Let's turn off the ads
Mm-hmm.
because I'm overwhelmed by this influx of money and opportunity and new clients, etc. Self sabotage is just self protection. So all of a sudden,
Mm-hmm.
I feel dysregulated, I feel overwhelmed and anxious. And so, in an effort to not feel that way, I sabotage the thing that went into creating my new level of success. And then I go back to, okay, I'm not running paid advertising. Well, now I'm back to, say 50K a month. But what typically tends to happen when business revenue grows? So does what? So does your expenses. Right? Well, now all of a sudden you're in a situation where it's like, oh, I'm not making enough money to keep up with the increase in expenses that I took on when all of a sudden I was making $250,000 a month, and now I'm in a pickle, right? And
Yep.
again, this is just a hypothetical example, but it's to kind of illustrate what happens to us internally when all of a sudden we start to experience the rapid growth that we all say we want, but are not yet prepared to handle from a nervous system perspective because of everything that comes with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. All right. I have a question for you. When it comes to, you know, probably most of the people know this. When like most of the gurus basically saying that you cannot
Sure.
chase money. You have to become
Yep.
the person that
Yeah.
attracts the money. What does it mean? Because I don't think that there is enough
Yep.
explanation for this. And this is like for those people who are starting a business and like are complete at the beginning. Like this may be helpful for
Sure.
them too.
So if we don't feel safe or worthy to receive or experiencing something, we're going to unconsciously push it away or put distance in between ourselves and that thing, whatever that thing is. So, going back to the example I just used previously, if
Mm-hmm.
I don't feel worthy or safe to have a multi-million dollar business, well, then I'm going to put distance in between me and what I need to do
Yep.
in order to realize, create a multi-million dollar business. Which, if we're talking about an online business, at a certain point in time, you're very likely going to need to turn on paid advertising if you really hope to create a multi-million dollar business. But if you don't feel worthy of that, if you don't feel safe to receive that amount of money and handle the responsibility that comes with it, because typically what comes with it is more clients, more responsibility, new hires, right? So now you're managing people's personalities and you're responsible for their income. Right? You're going to put distance in between you and those things. So you're never actually going to get around to investing in paid advertising and taking that risk or making the investment in, say, an ads manager and paying them, say, 3, 4, 5 grand a month to turn on the ads and get them working and optimize for them, etc., so that you can start to generate a return. So you're just not going to take that action. And it's going to look like exactly what we described earlier. I know the thing that I need to be doing, I'm just not doing it, right?
It's
Yeah.
yeah,
It's
yeah. I know. Yeah, we had actually the experience also like with recent client of ours, and it was like you like if you want to grow over like
mhm,
50K a month, you literally have to start running ads because like there is the amount of traffic that you have to produce is like it's
exponentially more.
just different
Yeah.
level, right? And she was like, yeah, and ads doesn't work for those type for this. I was like,
Right.
okay. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Right.
So, but yeah, in the end, we actually persuaded her, like we communicating well enough that she agreed on it, and literally like now it's
Yeah,
completely
so
fine.
now it's become a question of whether or not she sticks with it. Right?
Yeah, that's
Right.
yeah.
Because
But
now her
yeah.
circumstances have shifted, right? We did just
Mm-hmm.
enough work to get her to consent to ads.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's a question of, is she going to stick with it, right? Will that decision prove to
Mm-hmm.
be sustainable? And that's where most people are, run into issues, is not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily making more money, but keeping it, not attracting
Yeah.
more opportunity, but nurturing it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the big issue that we oftentimes find people in, is their results elevate beyond their current belief system and identity, at which point it's only a matter of time before they self-sabotage.
Mm-hmm.
So to your point,
Yeah.
it is an
It's
infinite game.
yeah.
It is an infinite game of
Yeah.
constantly up leveling your and optimizing for your belief system and your identity to keep pace with the results that you say you're committed to creating. When you do that, growth
Yeah.
becomes much easier, right? Because you're not experiencing nearly as much resistance internally as you continue to grow over time, right? The more effective you are inside of the business. And this is why I have business owners who will work with me for 2, 3, sometimes 4+ years, because much smoother experience when it comes to growing the business. Not as much internal resistance, more effective leadership, right? And as their circumstances change, what happens? We just find more things to work on within themselves because of the change of circumstances.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's this is really like I love this this conversation because like you went from literally like having a like pretty much local business to come like to doing like online marketing and now like literally like coaching people like with personal development. It's really interesting like how your way or your journey literally like went because it's really like did you like always had the passion to actually be a coach for like other people and teach people
Mhm.
to do like personal development, or have you like find it along the way actually?
A little bit of both. I went into personal development myself because I
Mm-hmm.
needed it. you know, I
Yep.
started to notice certain patterns within myself and my behavior that were preventing me from being more successful, um, not just in business, in career, but also in romantic relationship, right? So over time, I'm like, oh, I'm the common denominator here. What is it about me that continues to, for example, show up in this way inside of a romantic relationship and repeat these behavior patterns? What is it about me that will reach a certain level of monetary success but struggle to go beyond that, for example?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so I started to work through those things myself. And because fundamentally I was unfulfilled, I was like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
at a certain point in time, I got everything that I ever wanted. We had a multi-million-dollar business. I was making more money at that point in time in my life than I thought possible.
Yep.
I was an equity owner in the company, and we were rapidly scaling, right? And here I am finding myself unhappy and unfulfilled, right? Why is that? Because your success will always feel incomplete and insufficient until you've reconciled your pain.
Mm-hmm.
And most
Yep.
men,
Yep. Yep.
the ego doesn't have language for that. All it knows is more and the pursuit of the next level,
Mm-hmm.
because it thinks that it will experience what it's looking for on the other side of the next level, right? Once I get there, then I will be happy, at peace, and
Mm-hmm.
fulfilled.
Yep.
But
Yep.
that's a zero sum game, right? All the next level will do is further accentuate your current lack of happiness, peace, and fulfillment. So until we do the necessary internal work to uncover, discover, and ultimately break through the internal blocks and barriers that reside within you, because again, we all have them, you will continue to experience a lack of happiness, peace, and fulfillment.
Mm-hmm. Yep. 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 All right. Thank you so much for being here. It was amazing. Thank you for sharing so much
Definitely.
gold and your wisdom. Amazing. Um, Before I
Yeah.
let you go, where people can find you, like what is the where they can start following you, support you, like, join your
Yeah,
program or
so the
anything.
best place to connect with me is on my Instagram, which is I am Jake Kauffman, Kauffman. You can connect with me on there. I also have a link in my bio that lays out my current programs. We're releasing a program, or re-releasing a program, I should say, this month. I don't believe the page is live yet, but we'll send you the link so that you can post it in the show notes. It's our first, or it was our first self-paced program that we released several years ago, but that we're re-releasing with new content, updated modules, more material. It's called Healing in High Performance. The entire notion is that, right, without an equal degree of self-growth, an increase in high performance habits will be incomplete and insufficient. It won't last, like we've talked about this entire time. And so it is the latest cutting edge high performance habits paired with self growth strategies. So we'll send you that link. Really excited about that. Otherwise, looking forward to connect with you on my Instagram.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you. It was amazing, and I'm really blessed to have you here. And for everybody who's listening, if there's something in you, don't ignore it. Share it with someone who needs it. Subscribe, leave a review, and remember, you weren't born to follow the script. You weren't born to be free. Peace, everybody.